Dean Martin crashed Elvis's show in the middle of a song. What happened next left 5,000 people in tears. August 1969. The International Hotel in Las Vegas. Elvis Presley was in the middle of his comeback residency, and every show was sold out. After years away from live performing, Elvis was proving he was still the king. The energy in that room every night was electric. Dean Martin had tickets to the show. Good tickets. Front row, center. But Dean wasn't sitting in his seat. He was at the bar in the back of the showroom, 3 drinks in, watching Elvis on the monitors. Elvis was performing Can't Help Falling in Love. The audience was mesmerized. Elvis's voice filled the room, that smooth, powerful instrument that could break your heart with a single note. He was in the middle of the second verse when Dean set down his drink and started walking toward the stage. The security guard at the stage entrance tried to stop him. "Sir, you can't." Dean kept walking. "I'm Dean Martin." The guard recognized him and stepped aside. What was he going to do? Physically stop Dean Martin? Dean walked up the side steps to the stage. Elvis was facing the audience, singing, completely focused on the performance. He didn't see Dean approaching from stage left. The band saw him. The drummer missed a beat. The guitarist's eyes went wide, but they kept playing because they didn't know what else to do. The audience started noticing. Whispers. Pointing. "Is that Dean Martin? What's he doing?" Dean walked right up to Elvis. Stood next to him. Elvis turned, mid-lyric, and saw Dean standing there. For a split second, Elvis looked confused. Then concerned. Then he saw Dean's face. Dean wasn't smiling. He wasn't doing his usual cool, casual thing. He looked emotional. Raw, like something had broken open inside him. Elvis stopped singing. The band, confused, kept playing for a few more notes before they realized what was happening and stopped too. 5,000 people in complete silence. Elvis and Dean standing on stage together. Everyone wondering what was happening. Dean put his hand on Elvis's shoulder. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for interrupting. I needed to tell you something." Elvis, still holding the microphone, spoke quietly. "Dean, you okay? I've been sitting back there watching you perform, watching you pour your heart out, and I realized something." Dean's voice cracked slightly. "You're everything I pretended to be." The audience didn't know how to react. This wasn't scripted. This wasn't part of the show. This was real. "What are you talking about?" Elvis asked. "The real thing. The genuine article. I spent my whole career pretending not to care, acting like everything was effortless, like I was just showing up drunk and saying my lines. But you care about every note, every performance, every person in this room. You're not pretending to be anything. You're just you." Elvis looked at Dean, understanding dawning. "Dean, when I started, I had to create this persona. The drunk, the guy who doesn't try, because if I tried and failed, that would mean I wasn't good enough. But if I pretended not to try, I could always say I didn't really care anyway. It was armor, protection." Dean looked out at the audience. 5,000 faces staring back. "But you never needed armor. You just walked out there and gave everything. And when people criticized you, when they called you too much or too emotional or too whatever, you didn't hide. You just kept being yourself. I've been watching you tonight, and I'm watching someone who's brave in a way I never was. You're willing to fail in front of people. You're willing to care so much that it hurts. And I needed you to know that I see that. I see how hard that is, how much courage that takes." Elvis's eyes were wet. "Dean, you're one of the greatest. I'm one of the greatest pretenders." Dean interrupted gently. "You're one of the greatest performers. There's a difference." The audience was completely silent. This was the most honest moment many of them had ever witnessed. No jokes, no performance, just 2 legends being real with each other. "Do you know why I really came up here?" Dean asked. Elvis shook his head. "Because I'm 52 years old, and I just realized I've spent my entire career being afraid. Afraid to try too hard. Afraid to care too much. Afraid to be vulnerable. And then I'm sitting back there watching you. You're 34 and you've already lived more authentically than I have in 5 decades. Dean's voice got quieter. "I lost my son 3 years ago. Dean Paul. He was everything. And when he died, I didn't know how to show people how much it hurt. 'cause I'd spent so long pretending nothing could hurt me. So I just performed. Showed up. Did the jokes. Kept the act going. The audience was crying now. Many of them knew about Dean Paul Martin's death. It had been devastating, but they'd never heard Dean talk about it like this. But watching you tonight, watching you give everything to these people, not holding anything back, it made me realize I've been doing it wrong. Life isn't about protecting yourself. It's about being open enough to be hurt, being brave enough to care. Elvis stepped closer to Dean. Dean, you've always been brave. You stood up for Sammy when no one else would. You fought the mob. You built a career on your own terms. That's different. That's external. I'm talking about being brave enough to show people who you really are. The scared parts, the hurt parts, the parts that care so much, it's terrifying. Dean looked at Elvis. You do that every night. Every performance. You let people see all of you. The joy, the pain, the vulnerability. That's why they love you so much. Not because you're perfect, because you're real. Elvis didn't say anything, just pulled Dean into a hug. Two legends, embracing on stage while 5,000 people watched. When they separated, Dean wiped his eyes. I should let you finish your show. I'm sorry for interrupting. Don't apologize, Elvis said. Then, into the microphone, ladies and gentlemen, Dean Martin. The audience erupted. Standing ovation. Not for a performance, for honesty. Dean started to walk off stage, but Elvis grabbed his arm. Stay, finish the song with me. Elvis, I can't. This is your show. I'm asking you to stay. Dean looked at him, then nodded. Elvis counted off to the band. They started Can't Help Falling in Love from the beginning. Elvis sang the first verse, his voice strong and emotional. Then he stepped back and gestured to Dean. Dean stepped up to the microphone. And he sang, really sang. Not the casual, half-trying Dean Martin style. He sang like he meant every word, like he was finally letting people see what was underneath the cool exterior. Take my hand. Take my whole life too, for I can't help falling in love with you. His voice cracked on some notes. It wasn't technically perfect, but it was real. It was vulnerable. It was everything. Dean had just said he'd been afraid to be his whole career. When the song ended, the audience went wild. People were crying, standing, applauding, not because it was a great performance, because they just witnessed something true. Dean and Elvis took a bow together. Then Dean walked off stage, and Elvis continued with his show. Backstage, Dean sat in an empty dressing room, shaking. He'd just done something he'd never done before. He'd been completely honest in front of thousands of people. No armor, no jokes, no protection. There was a knock on the door. Elvis came in. You okay? Elvis asked. Dean nodded. I think so. I think I just needed to say all that. Out loud. To someone who would understand. Elvis sat down next to him. Why me? Because you've always been brave enough to be yourself. I needed to learn that from someone. Might as well be the king. They sat in silence for a moment. Can I tell you something? Elvis said. I've always envied you. Dean looked at him in disbelief. What? That cool you have. That ability to make everything look effortless. I've always been too much. Too emotional. Too intense. Too everything. I've watched you and Frank and the Rat Pack, and you all have this ease, this lightness. I've always wished I could be more like that. Dean laughed. A real laugh. We're both idiots. What? You wish you were more like me. I wish I was more like you. We're both looking at each other, thinking the other guy has it figured out. Elvis smiled. Maybe nobody has it figured out. Maybe, or maybe, we both have parts of it figured out, and we need to learn from each other. Elvis stood up. I should get back. But Dean, thank you. For what you said out there. For being honest. It meant something. Dean stood too. Thank you for letting me crash your show. And for not having security throw me out. Anytime. Literally anytime. You want to crash another show? You just show up. After Elvis left, Dean sat alone for a while longer. He thought about his career. About all the years of pretending. About the armor he'd built. About how exhausting it had been. To always be cool, always be casual, always be untouchable. And he thought about Elvis. about someone who'd never been afraid to be too much, who gave everything every night, who cared so deeply about his performances that it was almost painful to watch. Dean had walked onto that stage thinking he was going to tell Elvis something important, but really, he'd been telling himself, reminding himself that it was okay to be vulnerable, that strength wasn't about pretending nothing hurt. It was about being honest when things did hurt. The story of Dean crashing Elvis's show became legendary. Everyone who was there remembered it, not because it was a great musical moment, though the duet was beautiful, but because it was real. People had seen Dean Martin their whole lives. The cool guy, the casual singer, the drunk act. But that night, they saw someone different. They saw a man who was tired of pretending, who was brave enough to admit he'd been scared, who was honest enough to say he'd been doing it wrong. And they saw Elvis, the king of rock and roll, treating that honesty with the respect it deserved, not making a joke of it, not trying to lighten the mood, just accepting Dean's vulnerability and responding with his own. Years later, people who were there still talked about it. I was at the show when Dean crashed the stage. It became a moment they shared, a moment when two legends were just two human beings trying to figure out how to live authentically. Dean never stopped being Dean Martin. He still did the cool act, still did the jokes, still pretended to be casual about everything. But after that night, there was something different. A willingness to let the mask slip occasionally. A recognition that being vulnerable wasn't weakness. And Elvis continued being Elvis. Still too emotional, still too intense, still giving everything to every performance. But with a little bit of Dean's wisdom mixed in. A reminder that sometimes it was okay to protect yourself. That armor wasn't always a bad thing. Dean Martin crashed Elvis's show in the middle of a song. He interrupted a performance to tell another performer something he needed to say, and in doing so, he gave 5,000 people a gift they didn't expect. The gift of honesty. The gift of vulnerability. The gift of watching someone be brave enough to admit they'd been scared. That's not a performance. That's life. And sometimes, life is more powerful than any show.